Good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Gill, and for now, I am the community library manager for our fabulous West Hollywood Library, one of 6 LA County libraries, as we've said, proudly located in LA County's 3rd District. Tonight, I have the honor and privilege of introducing our featured guest, 3rd District Supervisor Lindsey Horvath. Supervisor Horvath was elected to the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors on November 8, 2022, and assumed office on December 5, 2022, after serving as a city council member and the longest consecutively serving mayor for the city of West Hollywood. She made history as the youngest woman ever to be elected to the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors. As the first millennial and currently the only renter to serve on the Board of Supervisor, Horvath brings a much-needed perspective to LA County leadership. Her commitment to serving others was shaped by her family and faith, which instilled in her a strong work ethic and made her a tireless advocate in addressing the complex problems facing Angelenos throughout LA County. While serving as a city council member and mayor for the city of West Hollywood, she spearheaded policies to make West Hollywood an age-friendly community to better serve residents of all ages. She created the first ever West Hollywood community response team to domestic violence. Supervisor Horvath has worked on a broad range of transportation and mobility issues, from her service as your transportation commissioner to championing metro rail projects in the district. She initiated the West Hollywood Bicycle Task Force, and through her leadership, West Hollywood was named the most walkable city in the entire state. Supervisor Horvath is widely known for her leadership on women's issues and served as a global coordinator for 1 Billion Rising, a global campaign of the V-Day movement to end violence against women and girls. She was the founding president of the Hollywood chapter of the National Organization for Women and previously served as president of National Women's Political Caucus, LA West Side. Supervisor Horvath is a champion for LGBTQ+ rights, having served as a board member of the Victory Fund and a founding board member of the No Hate campaign. She is an advocate for LGBTQ+ older adults through her work on the board of SAGE, Services and Advocacy for GLBT Elders. Supervisor Horvath is a champion for literacy and a LA County Library fan. Stop by one of our libraries and you may catch her at an upcoming Storytime program. You promise? Thank you, Supervisor Horvath, for supporting our libraries and joining us tonight. And tonight, Supervisor Horvath will be interviewed by Skye Patrick. Skye Patrick was appointed LA County Library Director in 2016. She is responsible for the library's 85 libraries, 15 vehicle mobile fleet, and resources that are used by more than 3.4 million customers across LA County. Skye is committed to breaking down barriers and increasing access for all. In addition to helping LA County Library go fine-free and initiating several other services to provide more access and opportunity for customers, Skye launched the library's I Count Equity Initiative. The library's I Count Equity Initiative ensures that library services and programs address the needs of the diverse communities across LA County. Under Skye's leadership, LA County Library was recently selected as one of 8 recipients of the 2023 National Medal for Museum and Library Service, the nation's highest honor given to museums and libraries that demonstrate excellence in their service to their communities. Skye continues to reinforce the library's role in the community as a civic and cultural center, a hub for public information, services, and discourse, and an institution of literacy, innovation, and lifelong learning. So now, join me in welcoming Supervisor Horvath and Skye Patrick.
Thank you so much, Matt. That was such a great introduction. Please remind me to tap you for the next time we need an MC. You've been hiding under my radar for 8 years now. Okay. Greetings, Supervisor Horvath. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing great. Thank you. Before we get started, I'm just going to do a quick land acknowledgement.
Yes, please.
The County of Los Angeles recognizes that we occupy land originally and still inhabited and cared for by the Tongva, Tattaviam, Serrano, Quiche, and Chumash people. We honor and pay respects to their elders and descendants, past, present, and emerging, as they continue their stewardship of these lands and waters. We acknowledge that settler colonization resulted in land seizure, disease, subjugation, slavery, relocation, broken promises, genocide, and multi-generational trauma. This acknowledgement demonstrates our responsibility and commitment to truth, healing, reconciliation, and to elevating, the stories, culture, and community of the original inhabitants of Los Angeles County. We are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on these ancestral lands, and we are dedicated to growing and sustaining relationships with Native peoples and local tribal governments, including, in no particular order, the Fernandino Toctavian Band of Mission Indians, the Gabrielino Tongva Indians of California Tribal Council, Gabrielino Tongva San Gabriel Band of Mission Indians, Gabrielino Band of Mission Indians Quiche Nation, San Manuel Band of Mission Indians, and San Fernandino Band of Mission Indians. Thank you. Okay, well, as I said, welcome. You'll see behind me, I have West Hollywood as my backdrop. You may or may not be aware that West Hollywood is my local county library, the one that is closest to my home. So I was there just this afternoon picking up my mail. Okay, let's get into these questions. So we have the pleasure of bringing you in. We really wanted to bring you in earlier, Supervisor, but we thought let's give her a little bit of time to acclimate to her new role.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And then we also wanted to have you provide you an opportunity to sort of reflect on some of these really big issues that we see weekly at the board meeting and that many of us see daily living in the county of Los Angeles. So let's get started with this one. I think this one's most appropriate. And obviously, you made history last year as the youngest woman, as Matt mentioned, and the first millennial elected to the County Board of Supervisors. But before that, you were a council member with the city of Los Angeles. Oops, did I just say that? The city of West Hollywood, 2015 to 2022. And as Matt mentioned, you served twice as mayor. Can you share with us what inspired you to pursue a career in public service and how your time at West Hollywood really prepared you for the role that you currently reside in?
Sure. So this was not what I planned to be doing with my life at all. I thought I was going to be a lawyer ever since I was a little kid. That was my dream. In fact, my mom likes to remind me that when I played house with my best friend Mariah growing up, we were single moms raising our kids, and we were both lawyers. So this was something that was never really on my radar screen. I actually came to Los Angeles with the intention of going to law school at UCLA. I was also recruited by a musical theater academy. I always did musical theater growing up. I did musical theater while I was in college, just sort of for fun. And I guess somebody saw me play the witch in Into the Woods. And so they decided that I should maybe think about doing that in LA as well. None of that happened because, as you also rightly noted, I am a millennial. So I'm of the generation where student loans have been, burdensome at best. And it was before Obamacare. So I had to get a job to help me pay not only my student loans and my rent and my life, but also to make sure I had healthcare and did all the things that you have to do when you graduate from college. And so I was able to find a job in creative advertising in the entertainment industry. And while that started as an initial job, it actually became my career. But I stayed involved in the community. As was noted in my bio, I helped to start the National Organization for Women Hollywood chapter. And it was through my work there and through other organizations that I was introduced to wonderful people like former Los Angeles Mayor, now Ambassador Eric Garcetti, and the mayor at the time in West Hollywood when I first got involved in the city was Mayor Abby Land, a friend of the county also. And so I went from a college experience being involved in the vagina monologues at a Catholic school, which was only the slightest bit controversial, to moving to an area in a region where I was living in Hollywood at the time, but West Hollywood was doing a production of the Vagina Monologues and the mayor was in it. And I was like, what is this magical place where the mayor is part of the Vagina Monologues? And so that's how I met Abby Land. It's how I got involved with the city of West Hollywood. I learned that it was actually a city body, the Women's Advisory Board, that sponsored this, the event and all of the work that the V-Day organization was doing in West Hollywood. And I was like, maybe someday I'll be invited to be on the Women's Advisory Board. Like maybe I'll be able to do that. And so not too long thereafter, Abby and others helped find a way to get me onto that board. And so I was able to serve there. I think about 8 months later, I became chair of the board. And it was during that time that one of our council members in the city had passed away. And the council decided to go through an appointment process, a process I affectionately refer to as the American Idol of politics, where we all showed up in a specially noticed meeting. And they publicly addressed, we were able to give public speeches. They addressed all of us. And that was sort of how, at the end of that evening, I was unanimously appointed. And that was how I got onto the city council in the first place. I was probably the most surprised person in the room. I had officially lived in the city for 18 months. And there were many formidable candidates who were considered members of the Planning Commission, of Rent Stabilization Commission, people with lots of different kinds of experience. And, but I was encouraged to apply because maybe, something else might come along and I would get to know people. And as it turned out, as we now know, the rest is sort of history. But that was my unorthodox introduction to elected office. To public service and just to being involved. And I tell that story often with generations who are younger than me in mind, because so often we hear young people referred to as, our future leaders. But in this case, I was appointed at the age of 26. And so sometimes people see in you leadership abilities you might not already see in yourself, first of all, but it was an important reminder to me that my perspective mattered now, not after I had kids or after I had spent decades in my career, but every single person's perspective, no matter what stage of life they're in, no matter how they came to a community, their perspective, their input matters. And so I feel very honored that West Hollywood gave me this opportunity to be of service so early in my life. Helped me grow. It's sort of funny to grow through your 20s and 30s in a more public place. But I will say it taught me a lot about who I am as a person, how to build bridges among people who might not be the likeliest members of a coalition, how to stand up for what I believe in, even in the face of adversity, and how to really try and come from a place of authenticity and humanity in the work that we do. Most importantly, because as government officials, we can get tied up in and caught up in how our respective bureaucracies work and speak in acronyms and in languages that mean something to us. But if we don't pay attention, we can very easily lose touch with the members of the public and who entrust us to serve them. And so I don't know if you hear Winston over here, but he's
I do. And I was going to say, are you hungry? And then I realized it's probably not your stomach, but the dogs.
Yeah, I think somebody must be walking around outside. So apologies in advance if he does get a little bit louder.
Well, so that's why I have my mic off. I have 2 dogs and they will burst out into barking for no apparent reason. So
Sure.
I understand.
Well, it's all right. He'll certainly make an appearance at some point, I'm sure. But I think West Hollywood gave me lots of experience in terms of being able to learn about land use and learn about transportation and a lot of the things that are entrusted to us as local government officials. But like I said, I think the intangibles of how to come, from a place of authenticity and in our engagement, how we just talk to people as people, to hear them out, and most importantly, really listen actively with people and bring their thoughts and perspective into the work that we do. And I can't think of a better community to be a part of. I am incredibly grateful for the people of West Hollywood and what this community has done, will do, and everything that it stood for. And I'm excited to see it grow.
I love that. I'll first say we all love Abby Land.
Yes.
She's really incredible, and we've had opportunities in this department to work with her on several occasions. There we are. Look at Winston.
All right. He's
As
down.
as in Churchill, I must ask.
Oh, everybody asked me that. No, I just,
Okay.
as you saw, he's like cute as a button. And so I was like, I couldn't call him Buttons or something that was sort of like it would just be too much. So I thought like a more serious name would make sense. And then everybody thinks he's named after Winston Churchill, which is so not the case.
Well, especially because you're a politician. But let me say, I'm going to out myself right now. I have a little black Havanese, and his name is Button.
Oh,
Well, it is too much. My daughter named him, but he is here, and he's somewhere over here. So not to derail the conversation, I want to say respond to a couple of things that I heard you say. First of all, it is a staggering idea to think of myself at 26 holding a public office. I can't imagine that kind of pressure. Obviously, West Hollywood is a smaller city. It is a city with immense privilege, but with that privilege, you also have another part of the community that has immense need. I can't imagine sort of like the sort of onboarding that you had to really get yourself into and around to be a good steward of public interest at 26. 36, I could maybe see it, but so kudos to you. And just to say that, like, it's so refreshing. You said it already, like there are voices that you represent. There are young people that you represent in your trajectory. So like, it's just quite amazing. And then I'll also say one other thing. So if you started at 26, I think that gives you 16 solid years as a politician. I would say that provides you a level of season that maybe you don't give yourself credit for.
Well, that's very kind. We just did an event yesterday with the Library Commission, as I know you know, with former Supervisor Lindsey, and he was actually elected to the Los Angeles City Council when he was 26. So we had that sort of fun fact in common.
So let's talk about a couple of other things. So you brought up so many different points that I want to kind of tease out, but I think one of the bigger points that I think is really relevant both for West Hollywood and for the County of Los Angeles at large is this idea of affordable housing. So I would imagine 16 years ago, I wasn't here yet. I imagine we still have some of the same issues. Obviously, it's been exacerbated at this point in time, but we've had some of the similar issues in housing and affordable housing. I used to live in San Francisco. This is an endemic to California, or at least the west side of California. Can you talk a little bit about your interests and how your own need for affordable housing has really sort of drawn or spearheaded some of your policy?
Absolutely. Well, I'm grateful to live in a city that was very forward thinking at the time of its incorporation. In fact, West Hollywood became a city in large part because of its fight for rent control. As I understand it, the county was considering a significant rental increase at the time. The city had gone, residents in the unincorporated area had gone for cityhood a couple of times. So I understand it, that third time was the charm, but it was really an unlikely coalition of seniors, of older adults, of LGBT folks, of Russian-speaking immigrants, largely Russian-speaking, but who all kind of came together saying that they needed to protect their affordable housing, the housing that they could afford. And so this rent stabilization ordinance came into effect shortly after incorporation, thanks to forward-thinking leadership. I think Abby was on the first planning commission, and council member John Heilman, who's currently on the city council, was actually one of the founding council members of the city. And through the work of so many people, that rent stabilization ordinance went into effect. And it has been a saving grace for many people in the community. And it has also been a guidepost. I know that even Raphael and DCBA has said that they looked at West Hollywood's RSO as the county was more recently looking at adopting a rent stabilization ordinance. And so as a renter myself, I would not be able to afford to live in West Hollywood without rent stabilization. And even with rent stabilization, it's a challenge. And so, you know, not only do we need to fight to protect people in the homes that they're already in and keeping rents affordable, but we also have to build housing that is affordable. By building more housing, we'll create more housing that's affordable, both by increasing the supply and through things like the inclusionary housing policy that was adopted in the community that required that covenanted affordable housing units that are dedicated for moderate, low, and very low income folks to be able to live in the community. I think that kind of a policy is very forward thinking because it creates the kind of housing that we really need. It intersperses it throughout buildings, the infill development that happens in communities,
That's right.
and you know, which can in some cases displace people. We can then recreate housing that is affordable, and West Hollywood does offer that for people who qualify, that they have the ability to come back into those affordable units. And I think that's very important. And I think it's important that it's a standard policy. It's not an individual negotiation, project by project, developer by developer in West Hollywood. It's codified.
Right.
And I think as cities are taking a look at how to make their communities more affordable, I really think that's one way. It's one of many tools that we have. But I think the reality of the rising cost of housing, especially for those of us who are coming into our adulthood with sizable debt, you know, I think a lot of my generation and younger, what we would have used as a down payment on a house in previous generations, we put towards our education, with the expectation that we would have access to high quality jobs that would help us pay down that debt. And of course, there are people who have been able to do that, but the economy hasn't been what we expected. You know, my generation, I graduated from college in 2004, and shortly thereafter, we saw the Great Recession and the economic impact that it had on all of us. And, you know, we continue to see economic impacts after things like the COVID-19 crisis. And so,
Right.
So I think it's no surprise that we are tackling not only an affordability and a housing crisis, but a homelessness crisis. People who are falling into homelessness because there are not housing options that are affordable to them, especially if they get displaced from housing in Los Angeles. And, you know, there's sort of this myth out there that homelessness happens because so many people come from all these different places. But now
That's
many
right.
studies have shown that actually our homelessness population, these are our people. These are people from California, from Los Angeles, and we need to take care of people who are here, who deserve to have an affordable place to live and a good quality of life. And so that's been something that's been very important to me to fight for.
Yes, there was a Times article recently in the last few weeks talking about this very issue. I mean, obviously we see these daily coming out of the Times, which is appropriate, about the fact that, you know, there are a good portion of folks who are experiencing homelessness are very well educated, associate and or bachelor's degrees, in some cases even master's degrees. So it really starts to shift how we are viewing this problem, that it's those people coming from the Midwest. I point at myself, I'm also from the Midwest, coming here for all the resources. But really, a lot of what we're seeing are just our regular Angelenos or folks from the LA County who are being priced out. I also will note for you, when I first moved here, we lived in an apartment, as most people do, and continue to do. And one of the things I thought was really impressive, and I don't remember the exact percentage, but they are required to have a certain percentage of the new builds apartments to be affordable housing. And we saw the impact of that. We saw almost a democratization of housing. In this case, I was in Atwater Village, and I saw the benefits of that. So I certainly hope that we can continue that. Supervisor, we're going to shift the gears a little bit and talk about a couple of other things. one of my favorite topics, the library. You and Supervisor Hahn of the 4th District co-authored a motion that would make libraries' digital library card accessible to California residents outside of Los Angeles County to access banned material that is happening across the country and in some places in California. Will you talk a little bit about what was behind the inspiration to co-author this motion?
Absolutely. And, I think I was once an LA County Library Commissioner, so that is always with me. And
You told me that recently, and that was the best thing. I didn't even know that. That's awesome.
Yes, I know, Joe. I was there. Joe Soslowski from West Hollywood was there. So many, but I really enjoyed that experience. I got to learn more about the library operation and what it takes to keep our libraries going. As we went through, as you've perfectly shown through the video, the changing West Hollywood Library, we really had to think about what are all the things that people need in this space, because we heard loud and clear how much they value it. And I think it's important for every community to invest in their library system, to make sure that libraries continue to be a place not only where you can access books, though that is incredibly important, but to access the services, to access the support that comes with the library, to have a place where you can ask questions and engage in learning in ways that no other place really provides in a community. And the idea that there are communities out there trying to take away resources, some of which I had, were just sort of staples in my childhood, I can't believe are being taken away now. But some of it is in the name of the culture wars that we're seeing, whether it's, being deemed quote unquote woke culture, all of that kind of nonsense. I think what we are seeing is people who are trying to deny access to critical information, to an understanding of who we are as a diverse people, to understanding history of very important communities, including our LGBTQ plus community. And that was why it was important to me to introduce during Pride Month and to give us some time to prepare how we actually launch this program fully by Banned Book Week, which is in October. But it's important to us that we want to make sure that these resources are available to people in California. These are digital resources that people don't have to come into our libraries to access. So finding a way to make sure that people can access them in a way that we can sustain in LA County, I think is incredibly important. And we just need to know who we are and know our history. And the idea that we're going to deny people that opportunity because we don't like what it tells us about our future, I just can't possibly understand that. It is incredibly helpful. And I've heard from countless people, how important it is for people, especially in the LGBTQ plus community, which of course is a very near and dear to my heart being in West Hollywood, but people who didn't know the rich history of which they are a part. And it gives people a culture and a context and an understanding of their being. And I think that's so incredibly important. We've seen this with, so many texts that are focused on Black people's history and people of color and immigration and, the very complicated history we have as a country. Of course, we want to champion all of the things that we are proud of as Americans, and we should also reckon with the things that we are still struggling with in order to become that more perfect union. And we do that by educating ourselves, by engaging in dialogue, by creating important programs. And libraries are at the center of all of that. So if we don't fight to protect our libraries, we're not doing our job.
And I'll say a couple of things. I could talk about this with you all night, but here's where I always land. You have to know what you don't like in order to know what you do like. And so you do need that variety. You need the representation. And so we all have the ability to decide that this particular item is not for me or for you, but that's your decision. That should never be left up to me or vice versa. And so that's where I always get a little bit caught up in this conversation, just the sheer thought that somebody else wants to make a decision about who can read what. And I always like to quote this one because I always thought it was Neil Gaiman, but it's not. It's a librarian, Jill Godwin, and they say, a truly great library contains something in it to offend everyone. That's when you know you did it right. Okay, moving on.
Love that.
So then, like, kind of staying within that library realm, how do you see libraries playing into breaking down barriers for society or vulnerable people? You kind of already spoke about it, but do you want to add anything else to it?
Absolutely. And I really also want to acknowledge our chair, Janice Hahn, for being on the motion with me. I know that this is an issue that's near and dear to her heart, and she has so many independent cities in addition to the city of Los Angeles and her district, and so many communities that are fighting to protect and their library resources. So I know it's really important to her. But I think, my experience of the library, I remember going as a child and checking out books with a different kind of system, and, seeing text.
The card catalog?
Yes, card catalog, seeing text on microfiche that I'm like, where is this from? And how do I, it's magical that you have access to these documents from so long ago. And now it's like all on these computers.
That's right.
But I think that having access to books, having access to computers, having access to digital books, so we can learn and engage and grow is important. But our libraries also offer so many social programs. I personally love the Drag Queen Story Hour with our young people in West Hollywood. But I know that the library, and Matt has done such a wonderful job of this, making sure that programs for our unhoused people who are seeking help getting back into a new career or into the career they were already in, that job support. So many of these programs were housed in our local library. It was a safe space for people to be able to go, for people to get connected with information and resources and supports that they deserve to have for a good quality of life. And it wasn't reserved just for those who had the resources to access them. It democratizes, to use your word, democratizes access to so much of what allows people to grow, step into new roles of leadership, and see the world differently. I think that's critically important as we think about how we're changing as a country, and hopefully how we fight for the democracy that we claim to treasure.
I was actually looking quickly on my desktop because I had an article open earlier, but I think I closed it it was in the BBC, just talking about everything that you just said, but this other sort of nuanced situation that I don't think we talk enough about, particularly as we're talking about people who are aging. And we're like the single serve communities, right? Like so many of us live alone. And how many people are just dealing with the social isolation? We had folks at one point in time, Supervisor, you may or may not be aware, we had our librarian staff just receiving calls from primarily elderly adults just wanting to talk to another person. And so there's also that like human connectivity that happens in libraries that we forget. We see people come in to read the paper. Sometimes they're not even looking at the paper. It's just an opportunity for them to be in this social, what Eric Klinenberg calls the social infrastructure, and be a part of something that anyone can be a part. You don't have to pay. You don't have to buy a $7 coffee to sit there. You can come in, you can come as you are. And I think that's one of those sort of nuanced things that people forget, that human connectivity that happens within libraries. So I just wanted to lift that up and call it out.
Absolutely. And just to tag onto that quickly, I think in my own life, Barbara Meltzer, who is a commissioner both in the city and in the county, but also is part of the Friends of the Library in West Hollywood, is to me the quintessential example of that. She always lifts up the issues of our older adults that often go invisible. And, during COVID, we used our recreation staff who were not out in the parks to actually call into people who might otherwise be living in isolation to check in on them, make sure they had food and resources and things that they needed. But our libraries played a critical role as well. And so I know that I just wanted to give a shout out to Barbara Meltzer and all the ways that she's touched my life. And I know many lives throughout Los Angeles County in that.
Yes, I'm very familiar with her. She was one of the first people I met when I came on board. She's been a huge advocate for the West Hollywood Library and beyond. She's awesome. So you did talk a little bit about how libraries impacted your life, but I have to ask you a couple of book questions. And this one is kind of a teaser into a question I'm going to ask you later. So when you were younger, can you name a book or two that like really inspired you and kind of help mold who you are? We talk about literature, talk about the need for representation and the need to see oneself. What is a book that just like squarely associates you with itself?
So if you go into any, I think most libraries in LA County now, they have all of us supervisors on posters with our books. And my book is The Giver. When it was turned into a movie, it was like, oh no, I don't know if I don't know how I feel about it. And I went and saw it, and it wasn't quite the experience I had as a young person. I remember reading it. I read it so many times. It was read to me in a classroom. It was a text that we used formally in class, but it was something I read multiple times. And the story of Jonah, who really was in a society that was grouped by age, and every age you did a certain task and you did a certain thing and very structured. And when it came time for him to get his assignment in the community, his assignment was a bit different, and he was called to be the next giver in the community. And it was really on that role as the keeper of knowledge and the keeper of history, the keeper of the understanding of culture and so many things. And I think that book touched me in so many ways, both sort of feeling like I was never a kid that quite fit in. So hearing a story about a kid who literally did not fit in with the rest of his classmates, but also, thinking about a world that didn't appreciate its culture, that didn't allow people to have difference because it might cause conflict or confusion. There were so many complex ideas in it that were taught to us, I feel, not only in an age appropriate way, but a more accessible way. But I even read it as an adult because I just love the story so much.
Absolutely. Lois Lauer is one of the best.
Oh, yeah. She came to speak to my school. And so she actually came when she won the Caldecott Medal for Number the Stars, which was another very powerful book about, Nazi Germany and told through the eyes of children. And it was, when she came to teach us about this story and why she chose to write it and what it meant to her, for us in this very small town, what felt to me world-renowned author coming to our very small town, I felt so special.
You
so
are
I wanted
correct.
to read everything she wrote.
Yeah, you are correct. World-renowned is, I think, appropriate. It's so interesting that you say that. First of all, you have missed your calling. I hear a children's librarian in you. I just two book talks like back to back without even blinking. And I know if we have
I'm happy to do it.
We're gonna get you in and have you read some stories to some of the youth. And I also appreciated everything that you said about that particular book. It resonates tremendously with this moment in time that we're in. And just like I can hear the passion, like how those two books specifically really changed you, really resonated with you. That's the whole purpose. That's the point. That's the point. And I'll reserve my comments for more of that for a little bit later. So let me ask you another question. I'm going to flip a little bit and ask you a few other questions here. As a policymaker for a county that is considered the 9th largest state in the union, I just want the people to absorb what I just said. What policy-related issue keeps you up at night?
So people often use that as a euphemism, but I have found already in my initial months on the job that there are things that literally keep me up at night. Obviously, the crisis of homelessness is something that has been growing, and I've stepped into in a new way as a supervisor. But there are nights where, if we didn't pass the policy that I had hoped for, or if we didn't get the answers that I had asked for in a particular committee meeting, it leads me to wonder how seriously everyone who is entrusted to show up on this issue takes it and is really committed to making a difference and doing something different. Again, yesterday we were speaking with former Supervisor Yaroslavsky, and his book talks about how homelessness has been a subject in the Los Angeles region for generations. And, while I was reading his book and hearing him talk, it leads you to believe, is this something, I've heard so many people call it an intractable problem, but for me, that just means like, it gives us permission to not do something about it. And so for me, I get really fired up when people speak about it in that way, because we have to do something about it. We have to change the system that clearly is not delivering the results that people need and deserve on our streets. And so that's one that I'm very passionate about. A couple that have also literally kept me up at night are our jails and our probation halls, as it relates to our youth. Knowing that we have literally lost lives in our jails, and one young person in our probation, in the care of our probation, is heartbreaking, doesn't even begin to cover it. And knowing that we have not just an official responsibility as policymakers, as you said, but a moral responsibility as members of a community to step up and do better and different is something I also take very seriously. And I don't mean to say that in a way like, in a way where I'm not sort of being real about the issue and the magnitude and the role that I have to play. I recognize that I'm one person, but one person joined with many others can make a difference. And I think the coalitions that we've seen come together on these issues have used their voices in such impactful and moving ways, both recently in our board meetings, but for many years, calling for all kinds of policy change at the county that I think is in large part what motivated me to run for this seat. This wasn't something I ever planned to do. As you mentioned, the county of Los Angeles is about the size of my home state. I'm originally from Ohio, and it's
from Michigan.
LA
Yes.
County. And so, the idea that I would ever be in this seat, let alone at this stage of my life, is not something that I ever expected. But I think what it says to me is people are really calling for something different. They're hoping that by choosing somebody who is unexpected for this kind of role, that we will sort of shake it up, and that I will bring more and different kinds of voices into the conversations that we have to have. And that kind of change not only means that I get to have a different kind of voice and a different kind of representation, but I have a responsibility to kick open the door for so many other people to come through with me. And so I think about that when I'm working on the issues that I've named, and so many other issues, who I try to look around and see who's not at the table and needs to be actively either seeking them out to join us, or to at least hear their perspective before I make a decision. And to try and make sure that the policy making we embark on is truly diverse and inclusive in our approach.
What you said reminded me of a painting. It's like a mural that I've seen in, I'm sorry, I think it's in Maryland someplace. Well, of course it's Maryland. It's a picture of Harriet Tubman, and there's her kicking through a wall, a brick wall, only to like reach her hand out to bring the young girl in through, to bring her with her. So it just sort of resonated for me. Supervisor, I have to get to some of these questions. We have all these questions coming, but before I go, I end every interview with this question.
Okay.
What are you reading?
Well, I am finishing Zev Yaroslavsky's memoir right now. And I'm also rereading, as I often do, Servant Leadership by Robert Greenleaf. It has been something that's really changed my life. And I first read it, I think, back in high school. And it's something I continue to read at different points in my life. I share that because it's helped me to think about who I want to be when I show up in a group, in a community, in any sort of setting, and especially in roles of leadership. How can we earn people's trust? How can we bring people together who need to work together but might not think that they can or should? And facilitate space that that leads to better outcomes. And I think servant leadership really helps me do that.
Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions here in the chat. I'll try and get to all of them. Here's one. What advice would you give someone who would like to pursue a career in politics?
I would say whatever you're doing, do that 100%. Sometimes people think that they need to be in a Democratic club or have been a poli-sci major or something that's very specific to government. And none of that is true. I would say whatever you're doing, be passionate, because that's how you're going to show people your best self and what you're capable of. So if it's your church group, if it's an environmental group, if you're passionate about the work that you're doing, whatever your career is, if you're passionate about taking care of your family, these are things that will reveal themselves not only in your immediate life and your immediate circle, but everyone around you will notice. And I think that's the first way to engage people, because then you are showing who you really are. We're sort of in a time of politics where people are kind of over the stump speeches and the polished, all of that kind of stuff. People really want to know who you are, and so showing up in the things that you love and are passionate about, I think, is the best way to show people who you will be when you're given an opportunity to lead.
How about that? Here's another one for you. What are some of the challenges that you've had to overcome in your career due to your gender and your age? And how have you used those challenges as opportunities to connect with your constituency?
How much time do we have for that?
Maybe like 3 minutes.
I know, right?
Yes.
Well, I've definitely been in rooms where I am the only one who looks like me. And I say it that way because that can mean so many things to different people. And so I try to call that out. Sometimes I very vividly remember being at a city's conference where there was a panel on how millennials are changing communities. And that one person on the panel was a millennial. It's like, that seems to be a glaring omission. But being a woman in politics, there was a conversation with a community group after our election, and somebody who was leading the conversation in the room acknowledged that the women who were running this election cycle weren't particularly likable. And I said, okay, well, that's fine. I won. So somebody must have liked me. But I think sometimes not calling people out directly, but just sort of letting them reveal themselves and have to live with the things that they say and do with time. I think that in some cases has been a good tactic in how to deal with some uncomfortable situations. Sometimes you do need to call it out so you can make people aware of, the privilege that they sit in, or the ways that they have an opportunity to make change if they just pay attention and act a little more consciously. And so I've tried to be diplomatic in some cases, and others I've gone, right out there and said what needed to be said. But I think, especially in this moment in time, there are things that I can say coming from a place of lived experience, but I really want to uplift the importance of allyship, because the ways that immigrants, that people of color, that our LGBT community are facing unprecedented hatred, it's important for those of us who are allies to any of those communities, or any community that is experiencing this intense hatred, to stand up and speak out as well. And so while sharing our lived experience can help inform people who need to hear it, I think it's also important for those of us who are paying attention well enough to speak up too, and not make those issues the responsibility of people who are already fighting oppression and hatred. And so I try to be mindful of that. I'm not trying to be preachy or get on a soapbox about it, but we do have a responsibility to one another if we want the peace in communities that I think I hear people calling for, whether you're concerned about crime that's happening in your community, or you want to see more social programs uplifting people out of poverty. everyone is wanting our communities to feel safer and more secure and places where they can belong. And we all have a responsibility in doing that.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for the reminder. I think I have time for one more question before we leave you to your evening. In what ways in what ways are you addressing the environmental challenges facing the county and promoting sustainability initiatives? This one I think is near and dear to most of our hearts because it is hell on wheels trying to get from one place to another in Los Angeles County. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think there are a few different ways we're tackling it. Sort of what you intimated, using my seat on the Metro board to increase access to public transportation and increase the availability of our public transportation is very important to me. And so we know that the greatest contributor to our CO2 problems and our CO2 emissions are cars on our freeways and on our local streets. So figuring out how we can get people out of their cars one by one down boulevards and freeways and into public transit is something I'm very passionate about. And it's trains, it's buses, it's bikes, it's so many options that we have now. So really thinking creatively about how we connect people from their housing to their work, and maybe even building them all of that in the same space is something I think about both from a transportation and land use perspective. But also, and I want to give a shout out to Aaron Ordauer, who is our environmental deputy in our office. He is, just jumping in fully into all of the ideas, the policies, and the work that we want to do in this space. We know that the county went through a grassroots bottoms-up approach to develop the county's award-winning sustainability plan, but it doesn't mean anything to us if we don't invest in making it come to life and making sure that it is implemented in all of our communities. And so measures like Measure W, which my predecessor, Supervisor Kuehl, informed, and now Councilmember Katie Yaroslavsky was a great contributor through her legal writing and her knowledge and research and her leadership. Measure W has made available incredible resources for safe, clean water throughout LA County. And we're going to work to make sure that that the policy operates as it's intended. So we might have to make a few adjustments to make it easier for people to access those resources to actually implement what was intended, but we're up to the challenge of doing that. We have to decarbonize our existing buildings and look at how we create a clean energy future. And so I hold a leadership role on the Clean Power Alliance, which is the county's new clean energy utility. And so many communities, many independent cities, in addition to the County of Los Angeles and the County of Ventura, have now become members of the Clean Power Alliance. It is now the largest community choice aggregate in the entire country, which means we are all working together to choose cleaner energy, we get to choose how energy is generated, the energy all of our homes consume. We get to choose how it's generated. And there are so many communities that have opted way ahead of the state schedule into 100% renewable energy. And I'm really excited about that. But in our district specifically, I know that we are incredibly focused on protecting the incredibly treasured biodiversity of Santa Monica Mountains, of our coastal communities, and making sure we're protecting our oceans. And so, we have a lot of work to do, but I think
we have a few things to accomplish.
Yeah, but
there's Los Angeles.
There's a lot that has gotten started, and so we have a good plan to implement and move forward.
I love that. I'll just do a shameless plug here. Of course, the library is like the cornerstone of sustainability, of reuse, of utilizing our buildings that are in your neighborhoods that are walkable to be able to work in. There's so many opportunities for sustainability through a public library. Supervisor, it's been a pleasure to spend this hour with you and get to know you a little bit more off the dais. We certainly appreciate you. And what we might do is do another round, like after a couple of more years, and see where you are, see what's changed in your point of view, if anything's changed at all.
I
Our
would love it.
community strides.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me in. Thank you for taking the time to do this. I know you have a lot on your plate as well. And so making programming like this available, I can already see here is touching people in ways that are really needed right now. Life can be heavy if we aren't there for each other. So thank you for making this possible. I'm happy to participate and be included. Thank you.
You bet. So I want to wrap up this evening with all of our viewers. Thank you so much. Supervisor may or may not be aware, we started these Trailblazers during the pandemic when our libraries weren't open and we still needed to look at different ways and innovative ways to provide programming. This one stuck. People love it. They always tune in. We always have a nice big audience. And I see a thank you. Great job from Joy Williams, I think is one of your commissioners. Thank you so much, Supervisor. We will see you on the path. Good night.
Thank you.